Chapter 15. Reporting Atlanta's Traffic. The fall of 1985 found me with a new job just after closing the Roger Wilson Guitar Studio. The position was that of on-air radio traffic reporter for Metro Traffic Control. A good friend and radio colleague, Jim Basile, had been reporting traffic on the air for a while and paved the way for me. He was heading to Los Angeles to take a shot at writing movie scripts, as well as infiltrate the film business any way he could. It was a timely move for me since I was due for a change. Extreme burnout had taken its toll on me after 12 years of nonstop guitar instruction. From 1983 to this point, my schedule got pretty full with quite a bit of freelance part-time radio positions. By this time, I still had the keys to 8 separate radio stations. That was the time when radio was real radio. The stations were separate entities going head-to-head for ratings and friendly competition in the Atlanta market. It was before they were, quote, clear-channeled, destined to be owned by one company and located down the hall from each other. Between that and my traffic reports over a company two-way radio from a company car, and sometimes a plane or helicopter, on a 20-station network, that was me all over. If you didn't hear me here, you heard me there. With the traffic job, my day would begin at 6:30 a.m. by hitting the road and looking for traffic jams. In Atlanta, they weren't hard to find. We knew where the trouble spots were, the Big Three, I-75, I-85, and Georgia 400, I-285, and the downtown connector. I would drive until 9 a.m. in the morning, only to return to do the afternoon drive from 3:30 to 6 p.m. There was never a dull moment. If there was one, it didn't last long. On an average day, the slowdowns were in the same places. We became traffic wordsmiths, since it was a challenge to describe the same old day in and day out traffic jams as not to sound redundant. Then there were the wrecks that kept it interesting. My average face-to-face encounter with a fatality was about once a month. That was the downside to the job. The upside was getting to learn the back roads and the shortcuts. My knowledge of Atlanta dating back to boarding school at Woodward Academy was already pretty extensive. Even back in boarding school, my roommates and friends that had cars would appoint me as their designated driver. The folks at Metro Traffic Control called me the map man, since they would ask me a certain road's location over the two-way radio. 9 times out of 10, I would know where it was. This was also the period when the intersection of I-85 and I-285 on Atlanta's north side earned the name Spaghetti Junction. According to Metro Traffic Control's general manager at the time, the tangled web of interstate highway overpasses resembled an overturned bowl of spaghetti while viewed from the air. The name stuck. Within a few months, Jim Basile cashed in his chips with Hollywood and returned to Atlanta and Metro Traffic Control. He took over the airborne reports, flying in a plane over Metro Atlanta. We were now both reporting traffic during the 2 rush hours, he from the air and me from the ground. Jim was also an accomplished bass player. Finding that out, he immediately filled that position for me in the low overhead band. Now we had our work cut out for us. We would finish our afternoon rush hour shifts, especially on Fridays, by heading straight into the joints to play our gigs. We had some long days on the radio, but we also sounded good as a band. The highlight of all our shared careers was the one weeknight when we had the opening slot for Leon Russell and Edgar Winter at the Center Stage Theater in Atlanta. Jim and I ended our afternoon rush hour traffic reporting shift at 6 p.m. By 6:30 p.m., we were sound checking on the stage in the theater. Our set was an exhilarating experience. Edgar Winter and Leon Russell brought the house down. It was a great night of music. And then it was back in the car and the plane for both of us the next morning talking about traffic jams and accidents. But once again, the music made it happen. There were also situations that found me right in the middle of covering many notable events such as presidential speeches, campaign appearances, sporting events, and breaking news stories over time while working for the other various Atlanta radio outlets. The experience of covering President Ronald Reagan speaking at Jimmy Carter's presidential library dedication was a memorable one. It was probably the only time those two were ever civil to each other. Walter Mondale's and Geraldine Ferraro's campaign as running mates blew through Atlanta one day. Their run was over about as fast as it had started. My top-of-the-list experience has to be the time that Georgia State Senator Julian Bond debated then Atlanta City Councilman and MLK civil rights activist John Lewis, broadcasting live on Atlanta News Radio. I was running audio on location for that broadcast. In the summer of 2015, longtime Georgia civil rights activist and former Georgia State Senator Julian Bond passed away at the age of 75. He was well respected, and rightly so far, for his involvement in civil rights. There were many tributes and memorials paid to him. I didn't know him personally, but I was present for what had to be one of the darkest days of his career. In 1986, Julian Bond gave up his state Senate seat to run for U.S. Congress against then Atlanta Councilman John Lewis. On this day, he was facing me at my radio audio board position from the other end of the long table in the Atlanta City Council chambers. Councilman Lewis was directly in front of me facing Julian, and running for U.S. Congress, both gentlemen were preparing to engage in a live radio debate. After having set up the microphones and establishing a clear signal back to the radio station, the debate began. In recent weeks, Bond's marital problems became headline news when his wife accused him of adultery and of cocaine use. That was the central issue on the table for this event. The signal from the two politicians' voices would travel directly through the microphone mixer and into my headphones, with me controlling the volume level. The signal immediately traveled over the phone lines back to the radio station and out onto the airwaves. Although any actual audio delay to hit the air would be nothing more than a split-second minimal, the signal still reached my ears first. When Atlanta City Councilman John Lewis challenged former Georgia State Senator Julian Bond live on the air to take a drug test, all bets were off. When Bond refused, one could, at least I seemed to, feel his political career end instantly. It reminded me of hearing air swiftly escape out of a tire. It was that intense. One could have sliced the tension with a knife. Bond's political life took a downward turn at that moment as he later lost the Democratic primary to his former friend and colleague, John Lewis. At this writing, the 50th anniversary of the March from Selma to Montgomery is being commemorated. It was a special event for U.S. Georgia Congressman John Lewis, since he can still be seen in photos marching on the front line with Dr. King. Other photos show him being beaten by Alabama state troopers on that fateful day. It has been an honor to meet him on several occasions, including shaking his hand and wishing him a happy 75th birthday at his special tribute event on March 28, 2015 in Atlanta. He is truly a civil rights icon. When Julian Bond passed away not too long after, he was also honored as a true civil rights hero and well-respected friend to many at several memorial services.